When you walk through the gates of Glastonbury Abbey, the sky opens up above you. The ruins rise from manicured grass like bones of something ancient and holy. Stone arches frame empty air where stained glass once filtered light, and birds nest in alcoves where monks once knelt. I always ask pilgrims to walk slowly here. Try to resist the urge to photograph everything, to read every placard, to turn this into an educational experience. Instead, I ask them to wander. Let your feet choose the path. Allow yourself to shift from doing to being. A few years ago, a pilgrim named David stood at the center of the nave, right where the high altar once stood. He's a physician, early 60s, the kind of man who spent his entire adult life being competent and useful. David hadn't taken a real vacation in 18 years. Even on this pilgrimage, he'd been checking his email, making sure his practice wasn't falling apart without him. Something about standing in that roofless nave took him by surprise. He looked up at the open sky where the ceiling used to be, and he said, "I don't know how to just be here. I don't know how to receive something I didn't work for." This is the theme we're exploring today. The capacity to let yourself be nourished without earning it. The permission to receive. You're listening to the Holy Rebels podcast, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Mystics. I'm Nina Hirlaender, Franciscan sister, spiritual director, and founder of Dancing Spirit Tours. If you're a spiritual seeker or a mystic in the making, you're in the right place. Let's get started. This is episode 5 of the Soul's 8 Thresholds of Transformation. We're walking together through an 8-part audio pilgrimage. And each week, I'm sharing one of the 8 traditional points on the Celtic Wheel of the Year. These are psycho-spiritual thresholds that every one of us faces at some point in our lives. Recording these episodes has become a kind of pilgrimage for me personally, because each week I find myself reliving moments from 15 years of guiding seekers through these sacred landscapes. The conversations at ancient wells, the silences in stone circles, the way someone's face changes when they finally let themselves feel something they've been holding at bay. I'm so excited to share that the final Celtic shamanism pilgrimage in England runs this May 2026, and this time will be the last. We've been evolving so much behind the scenes, and you'll hear about those changes soon. But for now, I want to give you one last opportunity to join me for what has been our most popular pilgrimage since the very beginning. In case this is your first time listening to the Holy Rebels podcast, let me say a word about what the Celtic Wheel of the Year actually is. The ancient Celts understood that nature moves through 8 distinct seasons, marked by solstices, equinoxes, and the cross-quarter days between them. Their entire way of life was organized around these turning points. They planted crops when the earth signaled readiness, not when a calendar dictated. They gathered for festivals when the light shifted, celebrating Beltane with bonfires as the summer arrived, and Samhain with ancestor rituals as darkness descended. Community decisions, when to move livestock to higher pastures, when to begin the harvest, when to slaughter animals for winter stores. All these choices followed nature's cues rather than arbitrary human schedules. And this wasn't superstition. It was deep attunement to the natural world. The Celts watched the land the way that you might watch a beloved friend's face, reading subtle signals, anticipating needs, responding to what was actually happening in the moment, rather than imposing an agenda from the outside. But they also understood that these outer seasons of nature mirror the inner seasons of the soul. The patterns of germination, growth, harvest, release happen in you. Each threshold represents a specific kind of transformation, a place of challenge and a place of growth. The first threshold, Imbolc, is about the quiet germination of a new idea. The second threshold, the spring equinox, is about choosing what stays and what goes so that you can step forward into your new chapter. The third threshold, Beltane, is about tuning into the source of your inspiration and allowing your joy to fuel your momentum. The fourth threshold, the summer solstice, is about standing in your full radiance and managing your energy without burning out. This is about learning that real strength includes rest. If you missed those episodes, you can go back and listen. They are what bring us to the fifth threshold today. Lammas, the threshold of receiving. Here's what makes this threshold different from everything we've explored so far. The first four thresholds are fundamentally about action, initiating, choosing, expressing, shining. They ask, what will you create? What will you decide? What will you offer? Lammas flips the question entirely. It asks, what will you allow in? This is a different skill set altogether. You can be brilliant at producing and terrible at metabolizing. You can be generous to everyone around you and stingy with yourself. You can build an impressive life, and yet you can have no idea how to enjoy it. The psychologist Abraham Maslow noticed something curious in his research on self-actualized people. He found that many high-functioning individuals have a fear of their own greatness. They're not blocked by external obstacles. They're blocked by an internal inability to receive their own potential. Can you relate? Lammas addresses exactly this. It's the threshold where you stop deflecting abundance and start digesting it, where gratitude moves from concept to cellular experience. The question shifts from, have I done enough to deserve this? To, am I present enough to receive what's here? If you've been feeling hungry for something deeper, if you struggle to enjoy what you've earned, if gratitude feels more like an obligation than a genuine response, you're standing at this threshold. The question is whether you'll cross it and finally allow yourself to be fed. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what is being asked of you at this stage. You'll have walked through Glastonbury Abbey with me and discovered one simple practice to help your body learn that receiving is a form of devotion. Let me paint the picture of what Lammas looks like in nature. August 1st, the height of summer's abundance. Fields heavy with wheat ready for cutting. Orchards sagging with fruit. Gardens overflowing with more tomatoes than what any one family could eat. The word Lammas comes from the Old English half-mass, loaf-mass. This is the day when the first grain was harvested, milled, baked into bread, and offered at the altar in thanksgiving. Notice the sequence. Months of work preceded this moment. There was plowing and planting, weeding and waiting. But now the work shifts. The grain won't nourish anyone while it stands in the field. It must be cut. It must be ground. It must be transformed into something that can be taken in, chewed, swallowed, and digested. The abundance must become sustenance. In nature, this is when the earth says, "I give of myself because I love you. Receive my gifts of abundance and nourishment." On the spiritual level, Lammas is the season when you're invited to stop producing and start digesting. It's the threshold of allowing nourishment to actually penetrate, not just touch the surface, but sink in, become part of you, change you from the inside. The philosopher Simone Weil wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Isn't that beautiful? At Lammas, we discover that receptivity is the rarest and purest form of gratitude. Not just saying thank you, but actually taking it in. This is harder than it sounds, because most of us have been thoroughly trained in the art of output. We know how to work, how to give, how to make ourselves useful, and we are praised for our productivity, our generosity, our tireless contribution. What we're rarely taught is the art of receptivity. How to receive a compliment without deflecting. How to rest without guilt. How to enjoy something fully without immediately planning what we'll do next. The theologian Howard Thurman put it this way. He said, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." I love that so much. Thurman knew that you cannot come alive on output alone. You must also receive, rest, beauty, nourishment, and love, or you become a machine that produces but never really feels it come alive from the inside. The result of chronic under-receiving is a particular kind of starvation. Soul hunger. You're surrounded by abundance, but somehow still malnourished. Well, Lammas says, the bread is baked, the table is set. Now you may sit down. You may receive as part of the sacred exchange. So here's how you know that you're standing at this Lammas threshold. There are signs. You're hungry for something that you can't quite name. Success isn't satisfying the way that you thought it would be. Maybe accomplishment leaves you feeling hollow, and there's a longing underneath your productivity that no amount of achievement seems to reach. Perhaps you struggle to savor what you've already earned. The moment you finish something, you're already thinking about the next thing. Celebration feels uncomfortable. Lingering feels wasteful. You're always looking past the present towards what else needs doing. Perhaps you notice yourself minimizing what you need. I'm fine. I don't need anything. Others have it harder than me. These phrases keep you at arm's length from your own desire to be nourished. Another sign you're at this threshold is that when stillness is offered, something in you rebels. Doing feels safe, but receiving feels dangerous. These are all signs that your soul is asking for lammas, asking to learn that taking in is as sacred as giving away. Now, there are two patterns that I see again and again when people struggle at this threshold. The first is treating desire as suspect. Let's say you want something, rest or beauty, pleasure, connection, recognition, delight. The moment you find yourself wanting that, there's an immediate voice that rises up and says, "Who do you think you are? Why do you need that? You should be satisfied with what you have." This voice sounds like humility, but it's actually a form of self-abandonment. It says, your want is shameful. Your needs make you needy. And it keeps you in a chronic state of pretending to want less than you do. The Jesuit priest, Father James Martin, writes about what he calls holy desire, the deep longings that God plants in the human heart as guidance towards fullness of life. These desires aren't obstacles to holiness, they're invitations to the sacred. And when you dismiss your hunger, you may actually be dismissing divine guidance. The second pattern that I see seekers get stuck in is staying in perpetual service mode. This one is particularly tricky because it feels so virtuous. You give and you show up for everyone. You're the reliable one, the generous one, the one who never asks for anything in return. It's Christ-like, right? Well, yes, but underneath this pattern, something else is also operating. The psychoanalyst Adam Phillips observed that the capacity to be alone is the capacity to love. And I would add that the capacity to receive is the capacity to truly give. When you refuse to receive, your giving eventually becomes hollow, a transaction rather than an overflow. So you stay in motion. You keep your hands full so there's no room to receive. You turn down offers of help. You apologize when someone gives you something, as if you've committed an offense by having needs. What's waiting for you On the other side of this threshold is a different experience entirely. Imagine the capacity to really enjoy without guilt. Gratitude that arises naturally because you've actually let the gift land. Imagine the ability to be genuinely nourished by ordinary moments, a meal, a pause in your workday, a conversation, an afternoon of rest. This is the fruit of Lammas. Let me take you to Glastonbury Abbey, the legendary burial place of the historic King Arthur. We arrive mid-morning when the sun is warm and the grounds are quiet. You enter through a small gate, and suddenly you're inside what was once the largest and wealthiest monastery in England. Before the dissolution, this place held the bones of kings, the treasures of centuries, a library that rivaled any in Europe. But now, the great church is a skeleton. Stone columns rise and end in the air where vaulted ceilings used to soar. Gothic arches frame views of grass and clouds. You can trace where walls once stood by the patterns in the stone, but the walls themselves are gone. There's something about ruins that teaches you about receiving. What remains at Glastonbury is not grandeur. The gold is gone, the stained glass is gone, the relics and the robes and the elaborate rituals are things of the past. But what remains is simpler. Stone that still holds centuries of prayer, and earth that still holds the memories of civilizations rising and falling. David, the physician I mentioned earlier, found himself drawn to the eastern ends of the ruins where the high altar once stood. I walked over and stood beside him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I've spent my whole life being useful, being competent, being the one who fixes things. And I'm good at it. I'm really good at it. He paused. A bird flew through the space where the roof used to be. But I don't know how to just stand here. I don't know how to let something fuel me without doing something to earn it. I asked him what he feels about this. Guilty, he immediately said. There's guilt in my stomach. Like I should be doing something productive right now. Like standing here is somehow stealing from someone. We talked about where the guilt came from, the messages he'd absorbed about usefulness and worth, the way his identity had become fused with his productivity, the fear underneath it all, that if he wasn't useful, he would not be loved. Carl Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. For David, Accepting himself meant accepting that he had needs, that he deserved rest, that his worth wasn't contingent on his output. I asked David, what if receiving is the most productive thing you could do right now? What if letting yourself be here is exactly what this moment is asking of you? Something shifted on his face. His shoulders dropped, and I could see him breathing more deeply. The Abbey is giving me something, he said slowly. You're right. It's not asking me to do anything. It's just offering. And I keep refusing to take it. We stood there for another 20 minutes. He did not check his phone. He did not take any photos. He just stood in that roofless nave and let the sky pour into him. Later, he told me that it was the first time in years he had felt genuinely present. This is what Lammas looks like when it moves through the human body. The harvest is already here. The bread is baked. This is where people discover that receiving is a form of prayer, and something in them finally unclenches. If you're feeling something stirring in you as you listen, if this has touched something that you've been hungry for, pay attention. I'm guiding this pilgrimage one final time. The registration link is in the show notes. Okay, let's talk about the wisdom of the body. When you're standing at the Lammas threshold, your body is sending you specific signals. There's often a tightness across your chest when someone offers you something, a discomfort, a bracing, as if receiving were a blow rather than a gift. Perhaps there's guilt that pools in your belly after pleasure or rest, that familiar discomfort that whispers you should be doing something more worthy. There's often a flatness when you try to access gratitude, as if the feeling can't quite be reached because it's blocked by something else. And then there are the opposite signals, the ones that show you what's possible, the softening that happens when you finally let yourself be cared for, the quiet longing for simple peace that emerges when you stop running long enough to feel it. The somatic therapist, Peter Levine, notes that trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. I would extend this and say that depletion is not about how much we give, but about how little we allow in. Your body knows the difference between sustainable generosity and over-functioning. If guilt around receiving is familiar to you, well, you're in good company, because this pattern is extraordinarily common, especially among conscientious people. It's often a learned spiritual habit, absorbed from family systems that value sacrifice, or religious contexts that treat pleasure with suspicion, or a culture that celebrates hustle rather than rest. If you can relate to this, I challenge you to stay present with one good thing today that you didn't earn. Just experience it. Don't deflect. Don't immediately give back. Don't explain why you deserve it or apologize for having it. Just let it land, and notice what happens when you do. When we speak about receiving as a spiritual practice, there's a voice from the Christian mystical tradition that can be our teacher. It's not a saint, it's not a famous theologian or a dramatic visionary. It's a cook. Brother Lawrence lived in 17th century Paris. He joined the Carmelites later in life, after working as a soldier and a footman. He had no formal education, no prestigious title, no special spiritual gifts that anyone noticed at first. He was assigned to the kitchen, and there he stayed most of his life, cooking meals and washing pots. After his death, when his letters and conversations were collected into a slim volume called The Practice of the Presence of God, his words spread across continents and centuries. Something about what he'd discovered in the kitchen spoke to people in a way that an elaborate spiritual system could not. Brother Lawrence found is simple. God is present now. And you can receive that presence without first making yourself worthy. He describes that learning to commune with God is like peeling potatoes, finding sacred encounters while scrubbing floors, receiving divine love in the clatter and chaos of a monastery kitchen with the same intimacy others sought in hours of formal prayer. He writes, "We ought not to be weary of doing little things for the love of God, who regards not the greatness of the work, but the love with which it is performed." What strikes me about Brother Lawrence is that he's describing a spirituality of receptivity. Most spiritual teachings focus on what we should do, give, sacrifice, produce. Brother Lawrence focuses on what we can receive. He speaks about what he calls practicing the presence, which means returning your attention to God again and again throughout the day. You notice your mind has wandered? You return. You notice you're caught in worry? You return. You notice you're resisting the moment, wishing it were different? Return. And here's the crucial part. You return without punishing yourself. Brother Lawrence was emphatic about this. When you realize you've been absent, you don't engage in elaborate self-criticism. You don't catalog your failures. You simply come back, the way that you'd return home after a short walk, without needing to justify where you've been. This echoes what the contemplative teacher Thomas Keating called the fundamental act of faith. It's the willingness to return to presence over and over, without self-condemnation. The return itself is the practice. The gentleness is the teaching. The receiving is the whole point. So think about what this means for your life. When you stay perpetually busy to avoid confronting your own needs, Brother Lawrence would gently suggest that your need itself is an invitation to intimacy with God. When you apologize for wanting things, he would point out that desire can be devotion, a turning toward what gives life, which is ultimately a turning toward the source of life. When you collapse into exhaustion and then berate yourself for not having given more, Brother Lawrence would offer this. He would say, come back to presence without punishment. Notice you're depleted, and notice God is here. And let that be enough. So here's the mantra that I want you to carry this week. Stop negotiating with love. Just receive and return to presence. Let me give you a practice to anchor this experience in your body. This practice fits Lammas because it teaches your nervous system that nourishment is available in moments that you've been rushing past. You need about 5 minutes to do this. Here's what you do. First, choose an ordinary task. Making coffee, or folding the laundry, or walking to your mailbox, something small that usually you do on autopilot while thinking about other things. Now, slow the action down, way down. Do it at half your normal speed, and feel each component of the movement. Notice textures, temperatures, weight. It might feel silly to do this at half speed, but bear with me. Just do the task half speed and let it take as long as it takes. Whenever your mind pulls you elsewhere, to your to-do list, or to a worry, or to something that you think is more important, just notice the pull and gently return to the sensation of what you're doing. Somewhere in the middle of the task, say to yourself, God is here. God is here. God is here. You're not saying this as an affirmation you're trying to believe, just as an experiment. Notice your ability to take in the concept of the presence of God in the here now. Continue the task at half speed, and at the end of the task, let yourself receive one small pleasure. Perhaps the warmth of the mug in your hands, or the orderliness of the folded fabric, or the simple fact of having a body that moves through space. And ask yourself, what changes for me when I stop trying to earn what is already being given? The writer and theologian Frederick Buechner says, "Pay attention to your life and listen to the messages that come through it." Well, one of those messages is that you are allowed to receive. I notice this invitation in my own life. When I'm depleted, my first instinct is often to find something to give, but that's often evasion. Giving keeps me in familiar territory. Receiving asks me to be vulnerable, to be in touch with myself. And when I practice taking in without apology, I remember that I am part of the ecosystem, not just the supplier. The harvest isn't complete until someone eats. And why can't that person be you? Okay, so today we crossed the Lammas threshold. Nourishment, gratitude, receiving without earning. We walked through Glastonbury Abbey's ruins and discovered the fullness of what the moment wants to give you. We're a little more than halfway around the Celtic Wheel of the Year. In episode 1, we crossed Imbolc, the first stirrings of new possibility beneath winter ground. In episode 2, the spring equinox, the courage to choose what stays and what ends. Episode 3, Beltane, the return of embodied joy. Episode 4, Summer Solstice, radiant presence that draws from support rather than depletion. And now, at Lammas, we've reached the first harvest. We're learning to enjoy. The wheel continues turning, and from here, the days grow shorter. The energy shifts from gathering to releasing. The second half of the cycle asks, what needs to be let go? What identities have expired? What is dying so something new can be born? Next week, we move to the autumn equinox, the threshold of release. This one is for anyone clinging to a role that no longer fits. If you've been holding on to something you used to be, a version of yourself that needs a proper ending, if you've been trying to resurrect something that's finished, this threshold will meet you where you are. In that episode, we're going to a place that teaches you how to release with dignity, and I'm so looking forward to sharing it with you. Before we close, I want to tell you about a free class that I hosted recently called The 8 Seasons of the Soul and How to Know Which One You're In. The response was extraordinary. People joined from across the globe for 75 minutes of conversation about these thresholds and how to recognize them in your life. If you missed it, the replay is still available for a few more days. Click the link in the show notes to watch it now. Your soul already knows what you need to do, and this class helps you trust what you already know. And if you're feeling called to walk this final pilgrimage to England with me, to cross these thresholds in the sacred landscape of England with a small group of sincere seekers, then I would love to meet you. The Celtic Shamanism Pilgrimage runs May 23 to June 2nd, 2026, and this is the last time. The registration link is in the show notes. As we close, let me return to the question that runs through this series. What is the next threshold your life is asking you to cross? May you receive what has been prepared for you. May you let it nourish you completely. May you discover that the table was set long ago and you have always had a seat. Until next week, trust the mystic within you.